Good afternoon, everyone. We're here for the April 14th, 2021 rendition of the Freight Transportation Advisory Committee. We're having another virtual workshop as we've had the past couple of months. My name is Kevin Walford from the Miami-Dade TPO. I'll be coordinating the meeting today. Just for those who don't know, the FTAC currently does not have a chair. We have a vice chair, Juan Flores. But so until we, if he Juan appears for this meeting, then he can lead the meeting. Otherwise, I'll continue from here on. Next slide, please. This is our agenda today. I'll be going over the rules of engagement, and we're going to have a presentation by Port Miami for their update on their cargo, and another presentation by Carlos Castro of FDOT District 6 regarding the Golden Glades Truck Travel Center. Our next workshop would be scheduled for Wednesday, May 12th, 2021. Next slide. Okay, these are the rules of engagement. I know some of you have seen it before, but as this meeting is being recorded, I have to make sure we repeat every single time so there aren't any confusions by anybody who may be watching this afterwards. This workshop is being held virtually and is being recorded. If you experience technical difficulties, please contact Lisa Wan at the number and email you see on your screen. So a member of our technical support team may assist you. Actually, you know what? Because just in case somebody's visually impaired and is listening to this, her number is 954-716-8823, and her email address is lisa.wan, J-U-A-N, @kinley-horn.com. All attendees will remain muted throughout the duration of this workshop. If you wish to provide a comment, please use the raise hand button. The chair will first acknowledge you and then your microphone will be unmuted. Please proceed by first providing your full name, agency represented, and then your comment. Your microphone will remain unmuted until the comment has been fully addressed. In compliance with all applicable rules and regulations, no actions or motions shall be permitted. Discussion shall be limited to matters listed in the published workshop agenda. Permissible discussions include presentations, questions and answers, comments related to the presentation. Any committee member deviating from these guidelines will be reminded as to limitations of any such discussion. Please hold comments until presentations are concluded. Next slide, please. All right, so just before going to the Port Miami cargo update, let me just run a list of the FTAC members. We're not keeping track of attendance in regards to making sure you meet your potential comments, but we do keep track so we know who is actually here. Let's call your name, and if you're here, just let me know. Juan Flores, Bill Arata,
here.
George Corzo, John, was that George? Okay. John Dome.
Here.
Mackenzie Furman.
Here.
Rose Martinez. Alejandra Puga. Stanley Rigaud. And Mike Silver.
Here.
All right, so we have 4 members here as we had earlier when I was changing the names. All right, so our first presentation, as I mentioned, is going to be from our Port Miami, Michael Bello. And Mike, you have the floor.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Kevin. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Great. Switching slides, do I just press an arrow or ask you to change the slide?
Just save next slide, and Lisa will switch a slide for you.
Excellent. Thank you so much. We're excited to be here at Port Miami. Today we'll be providing you a cargo update. We can go ahead and dive right in. Next slide. Thank you. Since 2015 until now, we've yielded 1 million TEUs 6 years in a row, and as presented above there, 2015, 2020. You could see cargo has been quite consistent and persevering throughout the different years, many years. 6 years in a row, again, 1 million TEUs. The overall increase from 2015, fiscal year 15 to 20 is approximately 5.85%. The best month ever being in January of this year, of note. Next slide, please. Of course, Port Miami's container port is number one container port in Florida for international trade. And what I wanted to share with you in a little more detail, while we all are recognized, there's been definitely a setback or a bit of turbulence in the last year with regards to cruise. Cargo by TEU has demonstrated a strong performance and strong response to the market changes and adaptation. As you'll note, there's it only experienced approximately 4.8% volume reduction in 2020, despite all of the activities. Port Miami has exceeded again 1 million TEU mark, and it continues to do that throughout the years, including 2020. Next slide, please. Now we're gonna a little more of a dive in regarding reefer. Port Miami rose to number 8 position nationwide fiscal year 2020 from number 9 in 2019. Reefer increased approximately 4%. And during the pandemic, reefer imports at Port Miami grew by 6.8%. This is really a very interesting aspect, is seeing what type of trends or emerging industries were surfaced. And of those trends, organic foods, biological drugs, online groceries, flowers, vaccines, pharmaceutical commerce, meal kitting was another aspect of trends that were quite prevalent, and all the supporting industries for meal kitting is represented here in terms of foods and online groceries. Port Miami is currently the 9th busiest U.S. port for reefer imports in the U.S. Based on Drury, an independent research and consulting service that addresses worldwide container indexes. And next slide, please. Pharma and medical equipment. Regarding pharma and medical equipment, since the COVID-19 pandemic, Port Miami has increased its pharma and medical equipment imports to 225% increase during the same period in 2019. When comparing, you could see regional performances, Europe being a very significant, almost 700% increase. I'm sure we're cognizant of the markets that drove this. Next slide, please. Cargo storage and fumigation warehouse. Port Miami was awarded a $33.5 million grant recently to expand its footprint, particularly functioning in the phytosanitary treatment and cold chain processing. And so the construction will be anticipated for a approximate no less than 100,000 square foot building, and it could be larger than 200,000 square feet. This is a ballpark number. This is open to the RFP submittals. State-of-the-art cold storage and fumigation facility that ensures Miami's competitive position in the local and regional, if not an international market. Cold storage and fumigation is expected to be, this project is expected to be a triple P project with a design build intent, and the funding structure and breakdown is as presented here. Port Miami contribution being 17%, the partner approximately at minimum 24%, and the federal funding through the grant is 59% for a total cost of $57 million estimated. Any questions?
I have a question. This is Mackenzie.
Hi, Mackenzie.
Can you elaborate a bit more on the private partnership aspect of this project?
Sure. This this will be advertised as a public RFP, anticipating a private partner where the port at this time anticipates a ground lease, and the private partner would be responsible for operation, management of the facility, and for whatever different programs they would be interested in. There could be, and we've had a lot of industry meetings, industry leadership meetings. There could be multiple partners in one team. For instance, there could be a real estate aspect and a fumigation aspect. There could be a cold chain processing aspect with the other two. We've had different meetings with various industry leaders that just kind of had discussions about how they would structure their participation in the with the facility. As with regards to the county steps back regarding any aspect of phytosanitary treatment or cold chain processing, as we're cognizant we have our purview, our lens is the ground lease itself and the presence of fumigation and cold chain processing expanding in the county.
Thank you.
Did that help? Okay, great.
Has there been further discussion, Michael, about the location of this facility, or is that still open for discussion?
Yeah. Hi, John. Yeah. No, the facility has proceeded with the 14-acre site off of Miami-Dade Road and just south of the southern tarmac of the Miami International Airport. Port Miami and MDAD, Miami Department of Aviation Department, sorry, Miami-Dade Aviation Department. They are working on an MOA right now that we're closing in on, and we're looking forward to the next steps of the RFP advertisement. And it's still for the same site. We're all focused on that site.
And you've been able to work something out with the party that claimed to have some rights to development on that, or are you still working on that?
The real estate team for the airport are confident, as well as the director of planning for the airport, that no changes have been made, and they are honed in on this site for us, and they don't see any hiccups. So they've asked us to continue proceeding with the MOA.
Good, great site.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Had a question.
Michael?
Yeah, Bill Arata, with this new cold storage and fumigation warehouse, can you translate that into how many more containers will those ships be carrying? And will this be new traffic or the same traffic, just with these ships coming from Central and South America carrying new containers or more?
I could follow up with the count on containers. It's in our, I apologize, it's in our application, and I haven't looked at that in a little bit. It was a John Martin analysis. But with regards to traffic, the goal of having the fumigation and cold chain processing at the airport is to have a more centralized location. Right now, the way the process works, as I understand, is we would have to have a duplicative circulation to get from our site, from the cargo out and then to certain destinations. Whereas if we're at the airport, we're more centralized and we go right from the airport to more of the county destinations. Right now, we're sort of way over on the east of where our destinations for the cargo would be. And so the way John Martin and Associates drove their findings was predicated on reduced truck traffic, and by having it located at the airport as opposed to at the port, for instance, there was some demonstration of reduced truck traffic.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? All right, then, thank you very much, Michael, for giving us an update as to what's going on over there at the port.
Thank you, Kevin.
I'm glad to see that you've had some wonderful news continuing through the pandemic and so forth, that, certain areas have dropped off, but other ones are still going strong. So that's good to know.
Thank you, Kevin. Thank you, everyone.
Can we get a copy of this PowerPoint, please?
Oh, sure. I'll send it to Kevin.
Yes, we were discussing that
during this-
because before that, it should have been included in your email package that was sent up, but I'm guessing for some reason it wasn't. But I will send you, the FTAC members, a copy of it once we're done.
Thank you.
All right. Next item we have now is item number 3, which is the FTAC Golden Glades Truck Travel Center. Going to get a status update on that from our Carlos Castro, FTAC District 6. All right, Carlos.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me okay? Sound check, 1, 2, 3.
Perfect.
Perfect. Excellent.
Go Dodgers.
Anyways, one more time, I'm back with a committee to provide you with an update on what's happening with this project, our truck parking facility here in District 6. And next slide, please. I'm gonna avoid talking about mission statements. This is my standard discussion, but go to the next slide, please, and dive right into the agenda. So again, I made several presentations on this very same subject, on this very same project for quite a few years now. In fact, I can probably talk about this for a long time. The presentation is only about 11, 12 slides, and mainly I'm going to focus on the next steps towards the end of the presentation, and really talk about our RFP development process. And I hear some similarities as to what our friends and partners are talking about at their fumigation and cold storage facility from Port Miami, O&M. And I think that's a pretty consistent subject that as county agencies or state agencies, our core competency may not lie in the operational side of some of these facilities. Therefore, we rely on the private sector for O&M, on operations and maintenance. Well, this is certainly a different type of project. It's a truck parking facility compared to Port Miami's effort. But it has some similarities on the O&M side, on the operations and maintenance side. And so you'll hear some similarities, of course. I'm not going to spend too much time talking about the overview of the project and the location. I'm kind of flash that throughout the next few slides and really point to the area, of course. I know that from time to time we have other folks that are joining our committee or simply participating. So I figure I always provide some reference points as to the location. But like I said earlier, I'm going to concentrate on talking about next steps. How do we get this to an actual construction project? And we're making progress, but as you may imagine, our project delivery cycle is somewhat lengthy. So next slide, please. And let me talk a little bit about location. Again, this is Golden Glades. You know the area very well. On the right-hand side, I keep reminding you about that multimodal facility, which is shaded in blue. That is a transit facility across the street from our potential truck parking facility. That construction project is finishing up right now. In the next 2-3 months, it will be finalized. So you'll have that state-of-the-art transit facility across the street, and then we'll begin the process of trying to deliver this commercial motor vehicle facility on the east lot there, shaded in orange. It's, as I stated before, this is state-owned facility, and we have total and complete autonomy as to the development. Next slide, please. So, diving right into a little bit of the history, you might be aware about, the prior history with these parcels of land. They were part of the HOV program dating back to the 1970s. So we've done a lot of work ever since, dating back to 2005, including PD&E, or project development environmental efforts, for both of these facilities. And then up until recently, we discussed the construction of the multimodal transit facility across the street. But suffice it to say that I'm I'm in the process right now of reevaluating some of those environmental documents or part of the PD&E process that were developed for the entire area. But now I'm updating those documents and those requirements for federal requirements for the truck travel center alone. Right? So that's what's happening right now. So I'll get into that in the next slide. Next slide, please. Again, purpose and need, I think it goes without saying, right, that we've documented the history and the need. So I'm going to skip this. So next slide, please. And really get into, what has been happening as of late. Obviously, I talked about this, updating those environmental documents that date back to last year. It's strictly for the truck travel center, for the project we're talking about. And that's just updating documents. We had some changes in our conceptual design that were really a function of some of the changes from some of the roadway projects in the area, specifically the I-95 southbound efforts that are going to be coming online in a few years or so. And again, going back to previous presentations, I've kind of shown you around the area with a multitude of roadway projects that are coming up in the area, whether we're talking about Palmetto, I-95, a portion of the Turnpike, and so forth, the entire Golden Glades improvements. Next slide, please. But I wanted to kind of bring that up and talk about where we are in the process as far as delivering this project. And I wanted to give you a hint here as to when do we see a potential facility breaking ground. And we're looking at sometime in the fourth quarter or calendar year 22, which coincides with our fiscal year 23. All right, so next slide, please. But now let me get into a couple of other items that are actually happening and are well underway right now in terms of how we foresee this facility and getting feedback from our potential partners and stakeholders in the area. And it's specifically on tandem trucks, right? You realize that this facility at some point was serving the Turnpike tandems. We'd relocated that area, the tandem parking, for a while now to advance the construction on the transit facility across the street. But suffice it to say that we have an effort underway with our friends and partners from the Turnpike to get a sense of the usage and the necessity of tandem operation within the facility. Right, so we got a survey out with our permit holders, and we want to, one more time, I want to thank Victoria Williams and her team. I know Victoria's present for being so helpful and partnering with the department to get the word out, to feed our permit holders and try to get some input from these folks to be able to be on the loop as far as the development efforts on this facility. So thank you, Victoria.
Absolutely, sir. Yes.
So anyway, that's an effort that's underway. And you may ask, why are we getting a pulse from the tandem operators, permit holders within the Turnpike? As I mentioned, because we've always envisioned continuing tandem operations in this facility. So that, the input and the feedback that we're going to get from these folks are going to give us an idea in the next stage of our development process. And the question is, we're obviously asking the questions about amenities, right? We're capacity usage. So we got a laundry list of questions. We're probing our permit holders, our tandem operators, to gain feedback and input as we develop conceptual alternatives, and at the same time as we're going to begin the process of writing that request for proposal for the construction of the facility. Next slide, please. And this is really what I'm going to concentrate in spending a little bit more time the rest of the way here with the presentation. As I mentioned, we're going to begin the RFP development process, sometime in July of this year. And again, to those that are not familiar with that process, that's a request for proposal where, the agencies come up with a set of instructions for the construction or the development of the project itself. And we're also going to proceed with a design build, as our friends from Port Miami stated for their project. We're also going to rely on the private sector for operations and maintenance, right? And on that front, we have not decided just yet as to the project delivery method, and I'll talk a little bit about that in the next slide. But suffice it to say, as I mentioned, a couple slides ago when I was showing you the schedule, we have construction funding. Our construction dollars are in fiscal year 23, which runs from July of calendar year 22 to June of 23, calendar year 23. So what that means is that we need to be able to execute a construction contract, or what we call letting, no later than June of 2023. We had the funding in place. We have the funding secured. So now we're going to go through that process where we develop the request for a proposal. We just awarded a contract to bring consultants on board to help us write that request for proposal. That's going to have the technical instructions and the requirements, the minimum site criteria. It also includes drafting a potential operating agreement. Well, we talked about that, right? We're the state, Department of Transportation, or district would much rather have the private sector operate and maintain it. I think that's the way to go. That's not our core competency, but I'm going to talk about the fact, the fact that we don't have to do it that way. We're prepared as an agency, as a district, to deliver the project on our own, and I'll expand upon that. But again, I anticipate advertising a contract for the design and construction and operations of the facility roughly about a year from now. That's, so I got pretty much 1 year to develop that request for proposal. It may take me less. We'll try to see how we accommodate that. And I'm, I've included approximately 1 year for that process because there are several moving parts. And one of the key elements, of course, is that operational agreement. We will actually have to enter into an operations, maintenance, leasing, and maintenance agreement with a potential private partner to operate the facility, right? And that has to have certain conditions and terms. So obviously, we need to get a pulse from the private sector as to what's palatable, what kind of risks are they willing to take, what are contractual terms that they can live with, they can accommodate through their processes, right? So that's where I'm headed. Next slide, please. So in terms of the project delivery, this is what I wanted to describe. We can certainly proceed with a traditional design build process. And that's where, obviously we advertise a contract in which, we're going to just hire, designers and a construction contractor to build a facility. And then the department would actually use its own resources through other contracts to, operate and maintain the facility. That's not necessarily the way we would want to do it. We would probably want to do some kind of what is called a DBOM, a design build, operate, maintain. So that's more or less where we're headed. But nevertheless, I think we're going through the process of, we're going to be going through the process, I should say, with our new consultants on board to really come up what is equitable, what is a lot more efficient for the state and our taxpayers, and what is efficient, right? That's something that is, I think that's critical. So suffice it to say one more time that we're not boxing ourselves in to the project delivery method. We're going to try to have options to make it equitable, to make it efficient, as I pointed out. So we have options. There's other options like a joint use leasing agreement, or simply, a DBMOM, in which we have some O&M elements integrated with construction responsibilities and so forth. So I think this is where it's going to be key to have some input from the private sector, right? And we're also sending a message. I think I've had this conversation with some of you before. We're sending a message to the state. Doesn't necessarily require a developer per se to deliver the facility, because there's a lot of interest from developers that may not necessarily be in the truck parking or industry, correct? They may very well look at truck parking as just the excuse for control of a site that is that is key in its it's very attractive, all right? So that's where we want to be able to separate who we conduct business with. And ideally, we want to be able to conduct business with those that are actually in the business of providing these types of services, operating, maintaining these types of facilities. It's a very small market, a niche market, but we'll wait and see how we progress. Now, I think this committee is going to be an integral part of the process because you have access to potential suitors, you have access to contacts, and I'm going to be relying and requesting your help at some point in the future with several engagements, including industry leadership forum, to get a pulse from the private sector to understand what their needs are, what are the risks that they're willing to take, so we can make the adjustments with an effective request for proposal that goes out there to the public, where it's essentially, something that the private sector can work with, right? We want to be, as I mentioned in previous presentations, we want to be flexible. We are providing some minimum site criteria. The department is stepping up to remove barriers of entry for the private sector to deliver these facilities by coming up with land, and we certainly have the ability to lease these types of make agreements up to 99 years, right? Long-term leasing agreements. We have that ability as a state agency, as a transportation agency. As I'm coming up with land, and we'll also have some capital contribution up front to the tune of almost $18 million. So here's our chance, as I said before in other presentations and those that I've talked about, truck parking, where you have a state agency that's filling a gap by incentivizing the private sector. But we want to be mindful, as I stated earlier, where these types of projects are not hijacked, and I'm using that term loosely here, for something else other than what it would be a truck parking facility. Our core mission is, truck parking. I stated before as well, minimum site criteria. It's going to include, obviously, number of truck parking spaces, and we'll have a scoring system to be able to analyze the proposals that come in from the private sector, right? That's part of our design build process. So roughly speaking here, we're looking at about 1.5 years, almost 2 years to really break ground on a project like this. So that's what I wanted to talk to you. I wanted to keep you up to date, give you the latest update with the project, because I think this is going to have an impact of how we conduct business on these types of facilities for the rest of the state, or any future projects in District 6 in Miami-Dade County, since I'm looking at also delivering similarly sized facilities in and around the county. So I think the next slide is mainly questions, the opportunity to gauge some input from the committee and those that are in attendance. So I'm going to open it up to the floor to field some questions, some comments, feedback.
All right, folks, start asking.
Yeah, I guess you guys have heard this for quite some time.
I guess you wowed them so much, Carlos, they're speechless.
No, I think it may be they have been completely PowerPointed out. That's a worded expression. I don't know. I think they've had enough of the Golden Glades Truck Travel Center. They have been hearing about this for a while, but I'm sure somebody may have some comments. George is actually laughing there.
Carlos, it's John. I was curious, what is the usage of tandems? Has it been increasing, decreasing? How do you see that?
That's also one of the questions we're trying to answer with that survey I mentioned, because at some point in the last few years, and I mean, we're talking 2016, 2017 timeframe, we had actually come up with a almost an 85 to 90% usability on the tandems. And it may not be so apparent though, because there's some pulses in there, right? On usability at some point. So yeah, and I don't know what it is today. Obviously right now we've relocated, tandem operations from the facility to an alternate site. So I couldn't answer that. Well, the answer is right now 0 at the facility, right? I don't know about the alternate side. We're trying to answer that question too, to get a better sense on usability.
I remember when there was a discussion a couple of years ago, just update me, there was the tandems are, if I remember, only allowed on the turnpike or not on the interstates. Is that correct?
On the turnpike, well, it's actually, it's clearly stated in our statutes,
Mhm.
and so forth, but they do have some flexibility on our, some limitations on the general network. So I'm not saying that they cannot ride on our surface streets. Yes, but it's a short haul. So,
Mhm.
yeah, that there are some limitations, but there's also flexibility. And I think Victoria may have a little bit of more insight on that front.
Sure, Carlos. If that's all right, I'll give a quick answer. There's these statutes dealing with tandems were loosened up a little bit recently, past 2 years or so, because it's very restrictive about their route. So like Carlos said, it needs to be the big streets. And if they get approval to go on, deviate from a route like he's had to have happen here, they have to get analysis of that alternate route, see if it will accommodate the needs, larger turning radii, that kind of thing. So I think the usage of them in northern part of the turnpike has also been, growing with economy as well. So the usage of tandems up and down is seen. We've had some pilot projects with electronic trucking that may utilize that. So the parking is always an issue. We've got a couple spots up in Broward and got some, what was that, Carlos, on the edge of US 27 on a ramp.
That's correct.
So these folks are challenged at times with the big restrictions. So it's great that GGI will help them. Thank you.
Yeah, one other point I failed to mention as part of that RFP development process, and I briefly touched up on it, but I didn't elaborate too much. And it's really leadership and industry forums, right? As I stated, we want to be able to be flexible and understand what the private sector is willing to digest with an RFP. And so we'll have those engagements coming up in the next few months or so, where we bring in industry, where we bring in the specialty shops like the Loves and the Pilots, Flying J's, and so forth, and even the smaller operations. And we'll have the opportunity to have one-on-one with structured interviews or market sounding. So those that have been in the or familiar with financial services industries and the approach will take a similar approach with market sounding, where we come up with a structured interview to be able to get at some of the obstacles and the constraints that the private sector may have when dealing with the state agency, or the implications of funding these projects with federal funds, which brings some additional elements in terms of disclosures from the private sector. So we've talked about those subjects before, and we're this is going to materialize sooner rather than later, and we're going to be relying on the committee to get the word out, to promote it, and to provide some feedback as well. We welcome the opportunity to hear from you once we get down to the granular level. Certainly, we have been talking about this project for quite some time, over 5 years now, and we always hear, look, yes, we're interested. Yes, we want to know some more, but until you finally get down to developing draft language on a request for proposal, and you start drafting language on a potential operating agreement, and you kind of tease that out of the private sector, then that's where we're going to hear whether we have viability, right? And that's where we deal with what is known as procurement and distress, right? And I think you folks are familiar with that dynamic.
Yeah.
But again, we want to be mindful going out to the private sector to hear their thoughts, to hear their input and feedback on what they're willing to tolerate, risk-wise and engagement-wise, or agreement-wise on several fronts. Not only on the technical side, but also on the legal side. We're going to have our general counsel at the state level in Tallahassee involved. We're going to have our project, what is called our project finance office or general accountability office out of Tallahassee, looking at this in detail, because this facility has a potential for revenue, right? Revenue generation. Once that happens, then, there's other elements that need to be handled on the part of our Tallahassee and leadership folks. And not only, like I said, on the legal side, we're certainly going to have strategies within our RFP development process where we're able to score and assess the financial viability of the firms or the partners that are going to try to pursue this project, right? We want to be able to assess financial elements, leasing, commercial viability, as I mentioned, and insurance elements. We have the experience, we have experience down here in District 6 with the Port of Miami Tunnel. I mean, in comparison, that's, this is nothing. This is structure, infrastructure wise, it doesn't even compare. But, we've done some work, with our partners, at the turnpike level and the concessionaire agreement. So we have ample information and strategies to build on. This is extremely unique. I've said it before, it's the first of its kind in the state of Florida. So we'll see how it goes.
Okay. Anybody else have any comments or questions?
Well, I guess it's John again here. At what point, Carlos, do you think you'll be looking at what you want an RFP to accommodate? Like now Baton has come up with these drop zones that have been talked about. The idea of how many services are put in this facility, whether you want to dictate it or you want to tell them your wish list, and the private partners would tell you how many of those items they can accommodate. All the surveys say the truck drivers want, number one, more hot showers, reliability, convenience items, fuel, the typical things that have come to be expected. And then, the other things would be lease terms and all that.
Right.
Will you try and develop a wish list of?
Yeah. So we have, when we develop that request for proposal document, it's a pretty lengthy document that only describes the technical requirements, the minimum side. But you also have, and we actually, in that process, by the way, we come up with a concept, and that's part of the requirement that we have on our end, so that we can actually show that we have a viable project that we can, or buildable project, so to speak, right? But we come up with, I guess, a form of a wish list. They have different names in our field reference documents, aspirational concepts. We use all kinds of different descriptions. But yeah, we're gonna address that within the RFP. Here's what is minimum site. This is what we must have. These are the requirements, right? And these elements are the wish list. We want to be flexible, as I stated, so that the private sector can dictate what it's better for the industry, right? But also for their own bottom line, financially, revenue generating, options, right? Whether it's, you said, some cold showers, some showers or convenience stores, the fueling. I don't think the fueling is something that we can, fueling operation is something that we can definitely include as a minimum site requirement. I think that may be a wish list. There may be a business case for that on the private sector. I don't think we can be in a position as a state agency to dictate that. So again, it goes without saying, the main theme that I propose here, which is flexibility for the private sector, right? But yes, there is minimum site criteria. We are going to require. We're going to start with a minimum number of truck parking spaces. That's what we want. We want to increase the capacity of truck parking spaces. That's our core mission. One, we want security, right? Security. We want to incorporate our TPAS system, our truck parking availability system that's been deployed throughout the state in our rest areas in our interstate highway system. We want to make sure that that's accounted for and is included. That is a requirement or minimum site criteria. And then, certainly we want to be able to let the private sector be, flexible and innovative, right? That's when we sort of get in trouble, when we start dictating elements within these types of projects that we have no experience with, and that's the reality. This is not part of our core competency. I've stated before, and I was in a statewide meeting earlier talking about this very same project, and I said it. There's going to be lessons learned. This is the beginning. I'm sure that the next project that's similar in nature, this one, can have a different perspective, improvements in process or RFP development and criteria development for the site. So, but I think one more time, I think we're closer to making this a reality, and I think this is going to open the door for future projects. This is sort of what I said before, our own pilot project, and I've been advocating for this, for at least on the state side, for quite some time. And you folks that have been involved with FTAC have been there even longer. So, but anyways, I figure I'd come back and give you a hint, give you a quick update, and really concentrate in talking about the RFP development and where I'm going to be getting a pulse from you all on feedback to connect the dots and reach out to the private sector. There's possibility, as I said earlier, that the developing community may have a different approach, to delivering the facility, and they're able and willing to put up with truck parking operations for gaining a foothold in the development side for some of the type of project. That's where we want to be careful too, right? There's an ability to go vertical on the site. So we want to be mindful. I think ideally, like I said, and I hate to sound repetitive, is our ideal suitor would be a conglomerate of design build firms and engineers and designers and contractors with a niche operator like a Love's, Pilot, Truck Travel Centers of America, and even the smaller shops. So again, but we'll see. If we're able to increase the amount of truck parking and enter into a better agreement that's a lot more equitable and beneficial to the state and logistics industry, so be it. That's why we make it public and we make it competitive, we make it open, and allowed for innovation. Maybe the development community that's not necessarily in the truck parking business has much better ideas to increase capacity and promote this a lot better. We'll wait and see. So that's what I see moving forward.
All right. Thank you very much, Carlos. And
Alrighty.
thank you for a wonderful presentation, and thank both of you and Michael for wonderful presentations today. That we're going to wrap it up. Our next meeting is going to be on May 12th, 2021. And Carlos, don't leave it. I just want to talk to you for a couple minutes, like 2-3 minutes, once I end the meeting. So to stay on the Zoom link if you don't mind. All right. So,
Yes, sir.
folks, that being said, so without any further ado, meeting is now adjourned. Time right now is 2:51, and see you all next month.
Thanks.